So you guys have been asking, Rob, where's Ultimate Cyclops? Where's Cyclops in the new Ultimate Universe? When do we get to see him, right? Does he have the same powers? Well, guys, we finally get him. And I gotta be honest with you, this guy's fate was a fate worse than death. So what this does is this kind of all starts out with a Sentinel arriving at a Eurasian Republic Sentinel manufacturing plant. Keeping in mind, the Eurasian Republic is a stronghold ran by Colossus, his sister Magik, and basically Omega Red. That while we still don't have the full totality of the backstory, at some point in time, the Maker basically screwed everything up in the universe, right? And so somehow or another, these three ended up becoming these major players and trying to destroy the mutant population. They're the ones that turned Wolverine into the Winter Soldier. And so once this thing gets here, right, this statement's made, we have a carrier Sentinel unit arriving at Base 77. Scan indicates 4 living specimens in containment aboard, but the code is muffled. And when the question's like, why is this code muffled? This guy says, I don't know how else to describe it, right? Like, didn't this unit go missing? And so that's what these guys are kind of talking amongst themselves, where they're like, look, we're supposed to have an inspection. The director's coming here, right? The top brass basically are coming here. We really don't want to have any problems. This is not the day to have any problems. So let's just go meet this unit ourselves. We'll inspect it. We'll make sure everything's on the up and up. And then once we verify that it is, it'll quell our anxiety, essentially. And so what they end up doing is they get to Base 77, where this Sentinel's at, right? They say request access to Base 77 platform, right? They give the proper code, and they're just like, okay, so this thing's been defaced, right, by the various mutants who exist out there. What you and I might say passes for the X-Men. Now, they're not really the X-Men. They're just kind of a ragtag band of rebel mutants who exist out there that are kind of unified, trying to free other captured mutants around the Eurasian Republic, but they're effectively the resistance forces. The problem is that in the midst of all of this, the weapon systems for this Sentinel start activating. And that's when they're like, go into lockdown, right? We're under attack. So at that point, you jump to the day before. And there's actually going to be a fun little bit of trivia here. I'm curious if any of you guys pick up on it. But one of the things that happens is you initially pick up with Mikhail Rasputin. Now that's one of the ironies of this new Ultimate Universe. Historically in Marvel Comics, Colossus and Magik are the good guys. Omega Red's kind of always been a villain, essentially. And then Mikhail Rasputin is the bad guy, whereas he's the good guy here. And that's when you kind of find out what's going on, right? He's directly addressing Forge, and he says, I need to know, will it be ready for tomorrow's mission, right? The response of Forge, of course, like it will absolutely be ready. And he's like, in the upload, and he says, almost there, right? 6 more hours, give or take. And of course, Mikhail's like, look, I need something a little more firm than give or take. But the response of Forge, I'm telling you, it'll be ready. Now, here's the funny thing. Mikhail says it had better be ready, Daniel. He refers to Forge by his name. Here's the trivia question that I have for you guys. What issue of Uncanny X-Men, written by Chris Claremont, was Daniel's name supposed to be revealed? It never was. But when was it supposed to be revealed? And you can't look it up on the internet. Honor system, guys. So the thing about this is that Forge is like, yeah, I mean, it will be ready, man. It'll be ready. And so, of course, that's where Mikhail's like, our Forge team has been working tirelessly to crack, reprogram, and modify a CS unit, or Carrier Sentinel unit, one of the vast fleet of Sentinels the Eurasian Republic has at their disposal. We've likely all come up against one, right? They're advanced technological killing machines specifically targeting mutant kind. But this one has something they do not, a ghost in the machine. This is not just a commandeered Sentinel, it is a member of your team. And he says the One has graciously suggested that we upload his consciousness into the unit. He will look like one of them, but he will be one of us. Now, for those of you guys who need a bit of a reminder, right, the One is basically David, Legion, as we know him in Marvel Comics, except instead of him being a wildly powerful mutant with thousands of personalities, and each personality having a power of its own, he's basically a computer system. Now, he was at one point a living being, right? That was in Ultimate Wolverine issue number 6, that he was a kid, he was basically caught in a landslide, and he was essentially believed to be dead. The idea is that it was the action of the Maker who had basically killed him, or at least attempted to kill him, to ensure David would never become that uber-powerful mutant that could potentially rewrite the entirety of reality that the Maker had worked on. But David's powers manifested, and so essentially he just rewrote his consciousness into computer code where he had been there ever since. He was the one that was instrumental in essentially undoing the brainwashing of Wolverine as the Winter Soldier and turning him back into his normal self. But him being uploaded into a Sentinel now presents 2 ideas. The first one is that seemingly seemingly he can now be destroyed. If that Sentinel's destroyed and there's no backup for the one, there's no one to really guide the team anymore, which would make it much easier for them to be destroyed. The other part of this, and most likely the scenario here, is that it now gives Marvel the ability to turn David Haller into someone who can actually go out there and do things, an active member of the team. But all this is very different from what we're used to. The traditional methods of storytelling for the X-Men, those trends are being bucked, so we don't necessarily know exactly how it's going to unfold. But the important thing is this, with this whole statement being made by Mikhail, the idea of backing up the one and so on and so forth, he says, this is optimal for your next mission, right? Cripple their Sentinel production by destroying their main manufacturing facility. And the question of Kitty Pryde, is that a smart thing to do? We've seen more Sentinel attacks, sure, but running headfirst into the killing machine factory is not going to save anyone. It's suicide. But that's where you learn the other reason for why they're doing it. He says, we have received intelligence that mutants have been captured and brought to the Master Mold, the central Sentinel manufacturing and testing site. This intelligence suggests that Directorate X are finding ways to biologically meld a mutant to a Sentinel unit. They're calling these abominations XS units. We do not know how many mutants were taken or how many have been tested on, at least not yet, but we will save who we can and ensure that atrocities like these never happen again, right? Now, here's the other part of this. The secure facility is almost completely automated, operating with a skeleton crew for one reason. It's a trap. A gamma bomb lives in its heart to destroy its secrets and any intruders lucky enough to survive entry. And that is quite brilliant because Mikhail's the one that designed it himself. And he says, we will have 5 minutes once the alarm is tripped to locate the captured mutants before the facility self-destructs. It will not fully dismantle their Sentinel program, but it will make them hurt. It's guerrilla warfare tactics, pot shots, doing what they can where they can. Now, guerrilla warfare tactics work, sometimes they don't work. Only time will tell, but that's when you jump back to the here and now, the moment when the Sentinel activates and you have Sabretooth, Mikhail, Wolverine, and Black Widow who all just come flying out of this thing and attack these guys. Now here's the irony of this whole situation. These are nowhere near the strongest mutants that exist out there or that we're even aware of as comic book fans. But that goes to show you how much of a shoestring budget they're running on as far as powerful mutants they have at their disposal. This is not like the main Marvel universe, right? They don't have a Colossus and they don't have a Nightcrawler because Nightcrawler's dead. Gambit may or may not be as powerful as we're traditionally used to. Who knows what the whole idea is with Rogue, to say nothing of the fact that there's also the Ultimate X-Men comic, where some of those characters are still being fleshed out. It's nothing like this, and it doesn't explore the X-Men universe in the same way this one does, but it still exists, right? So there are beings out there that are still immensely powerful that simply just are not here. But this is the crazy thing. At that point, you switch over to the director and Dr. Lysenko, and one of the things they realize is that it's their worst nightmare. It's launching a strike against their Sentinel production facility, right? It's their idea of building the next phase of weapons, arms, and armament against the mutant population. There is no mention of Nimrod, but it's not to say they're not working on one. Now, as soon as Wolverine sees her, he's immediately like, you, right? Like, just is incensed at this chick. But the fact is, right, the director's interest in Wolverine isn't really this interest of like a romantic connection. I mean, maybe there is some kind of, twisted version of love involved there, but all things seem to indicate it's more like a parent and a child. Because keep in mind, the director was instrumental in Wolverine being turned into the Winter Soldier. She oversaw all the brainwashing, the false memories, the training programs, right? There was just something there about him that she just never really wanted to let go of. Again, it could be some twisted variation of love, but the fact is, right, as soon as Wolverine makes his attack, right, goes against these guys, and that's when you see what happened with Ultimate Cyclops. Because as it turns out, Cyclops is one of these guys who had been merged with the Sentinel. This guy's head had been cut off, and he's just hooked up to wires in the belly of the beast. And that's him. That's what happened with Ultimate Cyclops. It's what they're doing with these various mutants that exist out here. It's why you haven't seen him. This guy was snatched up a long time ago. You take that, you combine it with the fact that Jean Grey and Professor Xavier, they were snatched up, right? Their minds were basically taken out of their bodies, and they're being used in order to telepathically control and brainwash mutants who were out there. I mean, it's a very, very dark and gruesome scene for the X-Men that exist out there, for the mutant population as a whole, right? Days of Future Future Past has nothing on this. Right? That's really what you're looking at here. So of course, with them having the head of Cyclops, this Sentinel's able to do exactly what you would expect. Fire off these optic blasts that allow him to momentarily overcome Wolverine. As for the other Sentinel, right, the one that's just a human body walking around, it just looks to be the body of Cyclops. Right, so the two potentially move in tandem, right? They walk as one singular unit. Now, of course, when Wolverine is sent flying off this thing, he's basically rescued by the One, right? Who literally sends out a tentacle and it kind of grabs Wolverine and it brings him back up and it allows Wolverine to survive another day. And so at that point, you jump back to the director and Dr. Lysenko, right? Now, Dr. Lysenko just kind of says, like, I never liked being here, right? I mean, we're literally in a facility sitting on top of what is probably the deadliest bomb ever created by man. Yeah, like we're literally we're standing in our own graves. Right? I have no desire to be in this place. So like, we need to get out of here as fast as we possibly can. But that's where the director is just like the Winter Soldier, right? The Winter Soldier's back here again. And Lysenko is just like, I know, right? He's the one that got away. Let him die in the explosion. There's no time to argue, right? We need to leave. And so as they're taking off, right, the doctor just says, XS units 1 and 2, come with us, protect the director, and do it at all costs. And so that's where you kind of follow Wolverine. Because the reality here is that Wolverine is deviating from the mission. Their mission was to get in here, destroy the Sentinel factory, and rescue any mutants they can, if there's even any mutants to rescue at all. But as soon as Wolverine got here, he immediately went after the director. And that's where things get really interesting here. And you guys will see what I mean as we get towards the end of this. Because what ends up happening is Wolverine, chasing them down, ends up coming across Cyclops and basically his body again, and he goes on the attack. But this time, he's blasted away yet again. Now, what's ironic about this is that potentially he recognizes Cyclops. There's no direct indication that he does. He destroys the physical body of the Sentinel, right? Just tears this thing to shreds, but he doesn't really seem to go in for the kill with regards to the direct Sentinel himself, right? The head of Cyclops. Now, this could simply just be circumstantial, right? He just doesn't get a chance to, right? Because of the fact that Cyclops' head blasts Wolverine and sends him flying. And then as soon as the director and the doctor are on the helicopter and they take off, the Sentinel bails out as well. But I would love to believe that on some level, before all of this happened, in the story that we simply have not been given yet, when Wolverine was part of the resistance force out there trying to rescue various mutants, he was ultimately kidnapped himself. He was taken into the Winter Soldier program, so basically the Ultimate Universe's version of Weapons Plus and Weapon X, that Cyclops was ideally one of the people that was trying to rescue him. And Cyclops was in turn taken, because it's not like Scott Summers is just a dude with just like, some glasses on his face. It's him with what would look to be his traditional X-Men uniform, his optic visor, right? The thing over his head. Now, maybe they designed it for the use of his powers to control and contain them and fire the optic blasts off in certain ways, but it would be all the more tragic if, in an effort to rescue Wolverine, Cyclops was taken. And that may even be how it is that Jean Grey and Professor X were taken. That's the story that we just don't have. But the reality here is that it's a twisted and grisly end, because once you get back to the helicopter itself with Wolverine, that he just watches them fly away, right? So again, he still holds that grudge. He still wants to go after them. And then of course you have Mikhail, who says, we have less than a minute. Where is he, Sabretooth? Where is Wolverine? Now, the cool thing about this is it looks like they did rescue a mutant, and it looks like the mutant they rescued was Iceman. It looks like they got Bobby Drake. And if they did, they now have, as most of you guys probably know, one of the most powerful mutants in existence on their side. But again, we don't necessarily know for sure because we don't really see his face. He looks like he's covered in ice, right? It looks like Bobby Drake, but only time will tell. But that's where Sabretooth is just like, I don't know where Wolverine is, right? He wandered off, right? And then that's when Wolverine reappears here. Now, you do get a kind of beef between the two of them, right? It doesn't really seem to be the same kind of beef that you have in the main Marvel Universe, where Wolverine has historically killed all of Wolverine's love interests on his birthday. But it is, of course, beef between the two of them because Winter Soldier has gone after Sabretooth and the people Sabretooth cares about, other members of the X-Men community. And that's where he kind of teases him, right? He probably saw a squirrel that got him running. And that's where Wolverine is just like, yeah, bub, something like that, right? So seemingly he chased them off. But the implication here, and this is where I kind of want to read between the lines, the indication here is that not everything seems to be what it actually seems to be. That they destroy the factory, right? But where Wolverine is just kind of forced to grab them and take off, it's entirely possible that Wolverine continuing to go after the director, even knowing what his mission is this kind of subconscious programming to always want to return home. And so if that's the case, Wolverine is essentially a Trojan horse and he just doesn't know it. And if he takes over a mission designed to lead the team against the director, he could very well just be leading them into a trap. Now, again, that's just kind of a guess, right? I'm just throwing my personal opinions out there, but let me know what you guys think, right? It is cool, but you guys finally get to see Cyclops. You get the answer to your question. Now the question becomes, how did he get that way? So with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.